Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Indiana IEP Resource Center's series, Conversations with the Authors. My name is Angie McKinney, and I'm a consultant with the center, and we are very excited this morning to welcome Lee Ann Jung, who's the author of Your Students, My Students, Our Students, fantastic book, Rethinking Equitable and Inclusive Classrooms. So I want to start with just a little bit of logistics. This is set up as a webinar, so please note that all your microphones have been muted and all your webcams are disabled for any participants. Throughout the session, though, we'd encourage you to post any general comments within the chat box. Now, the chat box automatically defaults to all panelists. So if you want everyone who's here to be able to see it, you need to change that to all panelists and attendees. If you have specific questions that you would like Lee Ann to address, if you could post those in the Q&A, and just type your comment and then click send. Today's session is being live captioned. So to enable the captions, just click on the CC button in the lower toolbar. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Mark Suter and we'll add his email into the chat box so that you have that. At the end of the session, one lucky person will be selected to receive a copy of Lee Ann's book. So stay tuned at the end and we will announce the winner. We have a short amount of time, so I'm going to pass it over to Lee Ann to start the conversation about her book. So welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Angela. Great to have you all today. I'm going to preface this with I'm having a little bit of internet difficulty today, so a little bit of difficulty loading the images I wanted to show you, but that's okay. That won't slow our conversation down at all. I'd like to start with just opening up for any questions you all have from having read the book. What kind of burning questions or thoughts did you have as you worked your way through the book? Any big cognitive shifts? So go ahead and start adding those as we begin this morning. My colleagues, Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, and Julie Kroner and I wrote this book wanting to offer a little bit of a shift within the field of education to bring together sometimes these divided worlds of special education and general education. And we titled the book as we did because we often found that the language that we're using can serve to divide. I'm teaching a course on this book right now with a group, and one of the comments that came in just this last evening was indeed about this, about the language that we're using, and how sometimes, you know, it's not only coming from a particular discipline or a particular age range of your students. These are your students, take your students, but it often comes from the specialists themselves saying, those are my babies, those are mine, those are my babies, my students. And even as endearing as that is, and even as well-intended as that is, even that language can serve to divide. And so we wrote this book hoping to provide some simple solutions and some thought provocations to bring us together in thinking about the strengths that we all have to contribute to all students in the building. How students who have labels really aren't different from students who don't have labels. They just fit the definition of having a label. For every student who has a label, there are many more students who don't quite meet the definition. You all can think of students who don't quite qualify based on a definition of autism spectrum disorders or intellectual disability or specific learning disability or any of the labels that we can think of that in the US qualify a student for an IEP. And when a student narrowly misses qualifying, they no longer have the special rights that are afforded to them by IDEA, but our instructional decisions, our intervention decisions should all be the same, regardless of whether there is a label in place or not. All right, I don't see any questions yet. and I would love to entertain some of those. I love interacting with people who have had a chance to read it and have had a chance to think about some of the implications. What I wanted to talk to you about today in our brief time together, and I have a really nice illustration that I'll share with Marcy after. Ooh, it might come up. It might load. I just noticed that it might load. But what I'd like to share with you today is a response to a question I get all the time, which is, how do we do this? How do we build this culture? You've talked about, you want to honor students' aspirations in their IEPs. You want classroom teachers and special education teachers to work together in universal design so that all students are benefiting from the expertise of both professionals. You want to use a service delivery model where special educators are working as consultants with classroom teachers to support them, not always delivering direct intervention. We want to stop using special educators as the homework help or the assignment help and really use them to deliver targeted interventions and build capacity in the school. But how do we do that? How do we actually accomplish all of that we're talking about in the book in order to really like move the school, like change the course of a school where that culture is different. And so I'd like to share with you something called Dilt's nested levels of logic. All right, are we seeing this okay? And I know you're seeing my whole screen here, having a little bit of issue with presenting, and I don't with the present button, and I don't want to push my luck here by pressing it. So, all right, so in Dilt's nested levels of logic, so you're seeing these nested containers over here on the left, right? Hang on, I'm not able to scroll, sorry. All right, so you're seeing these nested containers on the left. With Dilt's nested levels of logic, the conceptual framework here is that in order for one of the components of the conceptual framework to happen, all of the levels below have to be strong. So the nested containers represent each container has to be large enough in order for the subsequent container to fit in. So I'm going to scroll down here to the first one. And this foundational container, the very bottom container, the one that has to be there in order for all of this to work, is mission. An organization has to have a mission in place in order for organizational change to happen. And in order for, this ethos to drive, what we're about. So our school has to have a mission of inclusion. And again, not just the words on the paper, not just the words on the mission statement. It would be useful, go check out your mission statement. Does it imply, or are there any explicit words about all students that seem to imply inclusion and success for all and so forth? But that's necessary. Without a mission of inclusion, without that being the school's ethos, who they're about, a lot of this is going to be really difficult to accomplish. Next, all of the educators have to have an identity as an inclusive educator, meaning not only do the specialists, the special educators, learning support teachers, EL teachers, reading specialists, and so forth, have to see themselves as inclusive educators, but every classroom teacher, every counselor, every principal, every head of school has to see themselves as an inclusive educator. So, so here's a question. So imagine that someone comes to your school and they have some questions about inclusion or about special education. Would, if the principal at your school was approached, would the principal be able to lead a conversation and then include a special education teacher or a coordinator? Or would they immediately say, oh, you need to talk to the special education coordinator? We want every person in the building to see themselves as an inclusive educator. students who have labels and students who have IEPs are not special education students. They are general education students who receive special education services. All students are general education students. And so everybody in the building really needs to be an expert on all students with the support of others as needed. All right, so a question came in. I work with pre-service educators, general and special certifications. What would be the place for them to begin as a new staff member in a building to foster and support inclusive practices? Wow, that's a really tough one, isn't it? Because I mean, I can certainly relate. I'm sure you all can too. You can remember being a new staff member and fresh out of school. You've got some new ideas. You've got contemporary education and contemporary ideas and strategies to use, but you come into a school where there's an established culture and a bit of a pecking order, and so that can be difficult, right? That can be a difficult place to be, to try to operate in a position of to operate in a parallel position of authority and have influence. What I can say has been, I've noticed is really useful in this realm of inclusive strategies, is when a person is in a position of parallel authority, is sharing what's working for them, more than sharing, this is what we all need to do, if that makes sense. So having some strategies and sharing the impacts of those strategies that you're using. Also, I'm suggesting lately that that schools, as they build capacity within, that they really think about their professional development. You know, the old-fashioned way of conducting professional development was bring in a speaker for the day, and everybody sits in the auditorium and listens to the speaker for the day. And you know, that may or may not have any impact. But when we go into one another's classrooms, one, that's free, and it's some of the best professional learning that you'll ever see. So I'm suggesting, it doesn't quite answer your question about pre-service educators exactly. I mean, it does, or it does and. But if we have the leader, the building leader or a curriculum leader in a position of trying to create a database, create a spreadsheet, a database, a warehouse of expertise in the building, so that when somebody has a question about something, when somebody wants to learn a particular skill or a strategy or about something, that leader is able to connect that person to another person in the building who's done work on this. We're all into different things. We're all studying and honing our craft in different ways. You're reading the books you're reading. I'm reading the books I'm reading. I work in the areas I do. You're working in the areas you do. But if we have a sense of where the expertise is in our building, and everyone's an expertise, including these pre-service educators, including, once they become new staff members, they have some expertise, and we need to empower them to share their fresh perspective and their energy, right? And so one of the ways we can do this is by finding out what everybody's area of expertise is. It can be uncomfortable to own your own expertise, but we all have expertise. We all have something we can share. And so the leaders can connect. I've even seen on doors and right outside teachers' doors, come learn with me about, so that teachers can advertise what it is they're doing right now that they like to share, or come help me with, come so that we're building the capacity within our team. So we have to all see ourselves as experts. We have to all see ourselves as inclusive educators, all having something to share, but all having, ways in which we want to grow. I have a continual list of kind of my next things that I want to learn about within the field. So we need to be able to see ourselves as inclusive educators. I know that collective self-efficacy and self-efficacy are getting a lot of press right now, and for an important reason. Self-efficacy, I know you all know, is believing in your skills, believing you have the ability to make something happen. So within the realm of inclusion, this means that if I've got a student in my classroom who has maybe some needs that I've not seen before, it's okay. I know I can make it happen. I can learn what I need to, and I can support this student. I can make it happen. It's not just optimism. Um, I believe all students can learn. It's, I believe I'm the ingredient. I believe I can make this happen. And collective self-efficacy is when we as a group, so when we as a school are like, we are the machine. We can make this happen. We've got the skills in-house. Every person doesn't have every skill. Every person doesn't have every area of expertise. But if we come together in a systematic way, we can make this happen. We don't need to cluster students. We don't need to put all the students who have a particular label in this homeroom because that teacher has expertise. We don't need to do that. That introduces issues of equity for students and teachers. We can disperse students as they should be, and we can do this. We can teach one another, we can learn from one another, and we can grow and make this happen. Collective self-efficacy has an enormous effect size. And the best way to describe that, John Hattie, who is the most frequently cited person, I think, in terms of effect sizes as of late because of visible learning for teachers. He uses a Cohen's D, which is essentially, for those of you who are into stats or into distribution, represents effects in terms of standard deviation. So having, collect the degree to which we have collective self-efficacy explains over 1.5 standard deviations in change. So we can have an enormous impact on students' outcomes if we do have this self-efficacy. And that is our next category, or our next nested level, belief. So our school has a mission. This is who we are. I see myself as an inclusive educator. That's who I am. And I believe I can do it. Those are all distinctly different factors. I believe I can do it. If I don't believe I can do it, it's okay. I just need a mentor. I need someone to show me I can. I need maybe a special educator to come coach me along, not do it for me, not pull the student away, all the students away all the time for all of the interventions. It's not that we never do that, but there are a lot of interventions that I can learn if you coach me along and help me do it. Even complicated interventions, right? So it's not like, I'm not qualified. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not qualified to design range of motion exercises for a student who has cerebral palsy, but I can sure implement them. If I've got a qualified person who's designed those and comes and shows me how, I can implement that. And really important that I can, because a student needs a higher dosage of intervention than a physical therapist can provide. They need that plus, what's happening all of the time. Anybody who's had an injury, I'm kind of nursing tennis elbow right now, knows that you don't just go to the physical therapist. They do physical therapy and say, okay, you have a good time. I'll see you next week. You don't need to do anything. That's not how it goes. They say, I'm going to show you what you need to do, and you better do this like 30 times a day or 10 times a day or whatever it is. And it only works when that happens. It's because we need a higher dosage of intervention. But you can't tell kids to go practice intervention to acquire a skill most of the time. We need to be able to share expertise with one another so that students are getting intervention and supports and strategies from everyone that they're seeing all of the time. But we have to believe we can. So sometimes we need to coach one another along and point out the success that we're seeing so that we gain the confidence and gain the self-efficacy to be able to include students really well, include them and teach them really well. Now, self-efficacy, as you know, is situational, right? So if a third grade classroom teacher has had loads of experience with students with, let's say, dyslexia, but has never supported students who are needing lots of verbal communication support, then that teacher may feel less efficacious, when they have a student who has that need that they haven't experienced before. But over time, teachers will then begin to have self-efficacy in learning strategies in novel situations. And then we're onto something, right? Like, once I believe I can do this, even if it's something new, I believe in my skills, I believe in the skills of my team, we can do this, then we're getting somewhere. These are all the hard components. The mission, the identity, the belief is, these are the hardest components of the inclusive process. A lot of times I'm asked to come consult with a school and bring in the strategies. Come teach us the strategies for supporting behaviors. Come teach us the strategies for supporting students who have language-based reading disorders. Come teach us the strategies and so forth. And I can teach the strategies, but it won't work. It won't be useful unless we have all of this. It won't be useful if only the special educators are using the strategies or believe that they can use the strategies. Now, once you've got mission, identity, and belief in place, now the strategies are useful. So when we've got all of this work done, yes, someone to teach you the strategies for either this specific student or this kind of category of needs, and how to differentiate, how to use universal design and the 3 principles of universal design, then that's useful once we're there. So if you don't have the strategies yet, no worries, you just need a teacher. You've got all the other, you've worked through the hard parts. So this is easy. Once you know what to do, so this speaks to the person who asked earlier about pre-service educators. So those teachers they're learning a lot of new strategies, they're learning a lot of new skills, but maybe they haven't had a lot of experience putting those into place. They've had practicum or student teaching, but not a lot of experience. And I saw I don't know if this was on Twitter, I think this was on Twitter yesterday, maybe Facebook. It's on social media yesterday, that, brand new teachers are kind of like, they've gone to culinary school. They've gotten a few recipes and they can make a gourmet meal. But being an actual teacher is more like being on Top Chef or one of these programs where they've thrown a bunch of ingredients to you and they change every day and the challenge is new every day. Now you've got to figure out what to do. So we can all remember being there, right? Being able to make the gourmet meal, but not sure what to do in a novel situation. So that's next, is behavior. Can I execute the skills in real world? And if not, you need a coach. You know what to do. You just need someone to coach you along to be able to do it. And then finally, the last level is the easiest. You just need to be in an environment that allows you to. You need to be in an inclusive environment to be able to practice your inclusive skills, which is why we don't cluster students. That's why in the book we talk about not clustering students. Not only is that not great for students and it doesn't acknowledge that students' skills change and grow and flex and flux over time, but it also takes away the opportunity from a teacher to be able to gain teaching skills and inclusive skills. So, if we do this, if we cluster students in this way, it's not only issues of equity for students but also issues of equity for teachers. All right, so Dilt's nested levels of logic. There we go. So to make this happen, to make all of these, pieces in the book that seem easy on paper but hard in real life, this is why. It's because of this conceptual framework of how we need to move through supporting a school to change. All right, you've got to give me some questions here. Okay, let's see. If I click on open questions, how do we help reluctant teachers to buy in? So I can tell you how not to do it. It's certainly not by having presentations. I mean, you can have motivational kinds of speakers who can help with, a few nuggets here and there, but that's not really going to convince somebody. We used to think that the order was you teach people, then they're convinced, and then students grow and change. And we know that that's not really it. It's that you have to try something, you see it works, and then you're convinced. And so it's a matter of taking some of these pieces and working together as a team to implement. And having real conversation about how it's going, real conversation about student work, what's working, what's not working. Persuasive speech can be somewhat useful if somebody's already, oriented at least in that direction. But if you have faculty who really are really having trouble buying in, and we have to think about why, right? Like, why would somebody be having trouble buying in? Probably identity or belief. It's probably not because they're missing the strategies. It's probably more identity and belief. And so that's where the work has to come, is supporting teachers to see themselves as teachers of all students, making it the ethos of our school. In some ways, as we move forward and as we make new hires each year, our leaders need to hire for this. Our leaders need to hire people who have an identity of being an inclusive educator. We can teach the strategies, we can coach them, we can give them an environment. Those pieces are way easier than trying to convince someone that they're a teacher of all students. All right, I've only got 2 questions the whole time. Let me open the chat to see if anybody's put anything there.
I'm not seeing any particular questions in the chat. I wonder if you could just maybe give us a thought on, like, if you could just do one thing to get started to change the culture in your building, what would that be?
Yeah, if we could do just one thing, well, I guess I would share it. I guess I would say it this way. I mean, in my experience, to be convincing or to inspire, as a leader to take steps, I found that it takes both sharing the research as well as pairing that with success stories. So I often tell stories, of students. I often tell the story of my friend Janice Fialka's son, Micah Fialka Feldman, who, was on Obama's special committee for people with intellectual disabilities. He co-teaches at Syracuse University so that students can learn from someone who has an intellectual disability. He lives largely on his own. He has a girlfriend. He has a happy life. I tell the story of Micah, and then I ask people what they think his IQ score is. And it's funny. It's like Janice had sort of forgotten. And then when he was moving to New York, he had to apply for services for people with disabilities, and they had to pull up his test scores. They'd totally forgotten his IQ score. And she wrote me. She was like, "You're not going to believe this. His IQ score is 40." And so, telling stories, real stories, ideally from your school, success stories, along with what research has to say, can be compelling. But doing it in small groups and having real conversation, having it be dialogic rather than presenting at people. Ironic, since that's what I'm doing today. I'm presenting at you, but that's the most useful piece. So I would pick off one of these pieces of inclusion that we know are really, really successful, like universal design for learning. Pick off a piece of it. Go dig through UDL and pick off a piece of it and get really good at it and discuss the effects, discuss what you're seeing. There's a school I worked with worked with a number of schools last summer. Oh my gosh, the time is so weird now. Some time ago, before COVID, worked with some schools in California, and this PE teacher was doing amazing things with co-teaching, and just invited teachers to come in and see what was happening, and they could see the success, and it grew from there. So having some organic growth come from success from within, from the teacher level, not building superintendent level, certainly led and inspired there, but having the successes shown, particularly in their area of universal design, are where I would start.
Thank you so much, Lee Ann. We appreciate your time this morning. I see that it's 10:31. So I'm just glad that your internet held out long enough to get through this. That really means a lot for you to be here. So the big winner today of Lee Ann's book is Rhonda Peterson. So Rhonda, if you will please send me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat, and we will get that copy of Lee Ann's book out to you. So Lee Ann, again, thank you so much for being here, and thanks to all of you for attending today.
Bye. Thank you all. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you in person one day.